This is Jeff Davis with the Alignment Podcast, where we explore sales and marketing alignment strategy for B2B businesses. Make sure to visit jeffdavis2.com for all things alignment. Now let's talk about how to create togetherness.
Today's guest is Tony Perzow, #1 rated Keynote Speaker on negotiation, persuasion, and influence. Tony has worked with companies such as Red Bull, Walmart, Apple, and Google to help their professionals understand the science and art of persuasion. In our conversation, we discuss what Aristotle can teach us about using persuasion effectively for buyers and internal stakeholders, the 3 things you must do to meaningfully connect with any buyer, the buyer-seller relationship between sales and marketing, and how sales and marketing leaders can convince the CEO to give support to aligning sales and marketing. With that said, let's jump into the episode.
Tony, thank you for joining the program today.
Well, thank you for having me here, Jeff. It's very much appreciated. I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to speak to you.
I appreciate it as well. I think you have a really unique skill set in understanding this whole negotiation thing. And I know your focus is really more sales and sales training, but I think you also have an interesting perspective on how do we apply those principles as it's related to sales and marketing being more aligned and obviously driving more business for the organization. So before we jump into the episode, why don't we step back, and for those that are not aware of you and your work, tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay. So again, my name is Tony Perzow, and I guess I'm a negotiation subject matter expert. I say I guess because I never thought as a little boy that I would grow up to be a negotiation expert, but I kind of got into that role. First off, my dad, I'm not going to bore everybody with my life history, but my dad was a serial entrepreneur, and every week he was starting a new business. And as a kid, and he raised me. He was a single dad, and he raised me. And my bedroom, I say this to people, my bedroom became was my room, but it was also the room of all his failed business attempts. So I had protein powders in my room, and I had weightlifting belts, and I had his potato chip company, all the leftover bags of his potato chip company. So I was, and as a young boy, 12, 13, 11, I would accompany him to retailers and help him merchandise the shelves. So I was exposed to like entrepreneurial life and merchandising and how to sell my whole life as a young boy. And sure enough, as soon as I hit my 20s, I became an entrepreneur, right? I opened up a restaurant, and I owned real estate, and I had a distribution company, and I wound up in my 30s getting a job working for a big Iranian company who were the biggest closeout traders in the world, and they bought and sold $300-400 million closeouts. So I would buy like 50,000 TVs and then resell them to like Costco and Walmart. So that became my job. I would buy $100 million worth of excess TVs, and then I would have to jump on the phone and sell those TVs to Costco or Walmart. And I really got my training in negotiation there because I was always buying and selling, trading. And from there, I wound up getting hired by the Karas organization, which is the largest negotiation training company in the world, where I was mentored by, Dr. Karas. And that's where I learned really everything, the foundation of my negotiation training. And then I kind of took that a step further and got hired by another company, a pricing company, where I started kind of developing my own curriculum, my own programs, and started training people how to teach my negotiation concepts and philosophies. So here I am today, a negotiation expert, and it wasn't supposed to be that way, but I'm glad that it turned out that way. That was a scenic route to your question.
No, yeah. It sets the context of who you are and helps inform our listeners. What I also want to add to that is I like this idea of this persuasion science and how you work with salespeople and having what we talk about higher level conversations with prospects to really get them engaged. How do you, from your perspective, think that marketing should play a role in helping salespeople have those type of conversations?
Well, it goes both ways. I think a lot of salespeople don't know how to persuade. So you would think that a salesperson whose livelihood is dependent on persuading a customer would know the science of persuasion. But when I teach my seminars, one of the first questions I ask is, who here knows how to officially persuade somebody? And no one's hand really goes up. And from I think just in general, people don't have negotiation and persuasion skills because it's not something they were taught in schools, right? So really, and I've trained thousands of people. I've taught hundreds and hundreds of seminars. And what it comes down to, when it comes down to in terms of persuasion, negotiation, and communication, is learning how to say no, learning how to shut up, and learn how to listen. So when it comes to aligning sales and marketing, it really comes down to communication. It really comes down to information gathering. So asking the right questions, listening, not talking, listening to the person's answer, or to the department's answer, right? Whoever those key players are, and then being able to articulate what it is they're saying to you, and then and also learning how to say no, I don't agree with that. But saying no in a way that doesn't bring conflict and emotion into the communication, right? So it comes down to those three things. So when you say aligning marketing and sales, I think it starts up. It's a C-level kind of initiative where it's the leadership that says, hey, we need to bring these two departments closer together. And how do we do that? Well, I mean, we need to kind of communicate, we need to listen, and we need to feel like we're one unit. And I know this is the big thing right now. If you kind of Google aligning sales and marketing, the revenue department, that's like a big thing that we hear. But I totally agree with that. How do we bring sales and marketing on the same page and create this revenue department where both sides, marketing and sales, understand each other, appreciate each other, and understand each other's jobs? And that comes down to listening, training, communicating, and being able to understand each other's roles. But the problem is a lot of salespeople don't understand the sales role. A lot of marketing people don't understand the sales role, and a lot of salespeople don't understand the marketing role. So it really comes down to understanding, communicating, and I guess training, and that comes down from the leadership. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And I'm glad you brought up the point about it coming from the C-suite, because the more conversations that I have about this, we are really honing in on the fact that nothing is going to fundamentally change until we get the C-suite, specifically the CEO, on board for an initiative like this. But I do want to tease out of what you said, which I thought was interesting, because I want to learn about this. Help us understand, what is persuasion science? What is the art of persuasion? Because I don't know that people really know what that is.
I was just at an event where someone was talking about video and the power of video when it comes to marketing and the future of video, and they were saying that they used an acronym. Does that video have stuff? And the acronym and what it stood for was is it sexy? Does it tease? Is it I forget what the U stands for. And F is it funny and fear? And so when it comes to persuasion, first off, an epidemic in our country in terms of persuasion and communication is that we love email, right? So we love hiding behind the computer screen, and a lot of salespeople, we're losing contact and we're losing connection with people. And one of the biggest mistakes we make in terms of negotiating and communication is typing everything, is using electronic communication. It's almost impossible to persuade somebody through electronic communication, through email, because you're lacking and even on the phone, it's tough as well, because you're lacking three very important pillars when it comes to persuasion. And these pillars were developed by an old hack. He lived about 3,000 years ago. You might know who he is, Aristotle, right? And Aristotle was fascinated by people who were able to get up on stage and talk to thousands of people and have these people hanging off every single word. And he became fascinated by these people. What are these people doing to capture these large audiences that the average pedestrian, the average person can't do. So he spent years studying the greatest speakers of the land to figure out what they were doing. And he noticed that they were all doing the same thing. They were using, he called them my 3 pillars of persuasion. We now know it as Aristotle's 3 pillars of persuasion. And every persuasive argument needs to have these 3 pillars. And the first one is ethos, or ethos, also sometimes pronounced. And that is, we all know that. If I were to ask you, Jeff, right now, persuade me, chances are you would go right to ethos, which is basically bragging about myself, bragging about our organization, right? It showing the other party that I'm an authority figure, that I'm credible, that I know what I'm talking about. I'm CEO of this company. That's ethos right there. A lot of people, they spend way too much time. Yes, you do need ethos. You do need to brag about yourself and your organization. But most people spend way too much time there, and that's all they do when they try to persuade somebody. In fact, switching gears right now, artificial intelligence is now telling us, they call it the 2-minute cliff. So there's a company who I work with who has taken over 500,000 sales conversations through telephone and plugged it through their algorithm. And what they found is that and they're trying to figure out the difference between top closers, top salespeople, and bottom salespeople, people who are not so hot at selling. And what they're finding is that when a salesperson brags about themselves and their organization for more than 2 minutes in a typical prospecting call, a 45-minute to 1-hour conversation, their chances of closing drastically decrease every second after 2 minutes. So yes, you do need to brag about yourself, but keep it to 2 minutes or less. So back to my point of persuasion. So yes, you do need to brag about yourself, but you also need to use the other 2 pillars, which are more important. The second one is called logos, which is where we get our word logo from. And logos is basically showing is legitimacy. I call it the talk is cheap pillar, because if I told you, Jeff, listen, I just opened up a restaurant here in LA. I didn't. I'm just bringing up an example. I opened up a restaurant, and I was reviewed by the LA Times, and they gave me 5 out of 5 stars. That is persuasive. You might believe me. You might not believe me. I don't know. But if I were to tell you that exact same line, I got 5 out of 5 stars in the LA Times, as I'm showing you the article, as I'm saying it, that right there is logos. So I'm backing up the things I'm saying with actual evidence and with proof. So persuasion, you need to be able to prove to the other party and support the things you say with proof and evidence. And of course, the third one, which we're going down to, and what we're learning is incredibly important. And this is the most important pillar of them all, which is pathos, which is emotion, right? How do we get the other party feeling something? We're all feeling creatures, and we're doing less and less feeling in today's society because technology, we're hidden behind computers, we're social media, we're texting, we're getting less and less human contact. But if you want to persuade somebody, you got to get the other party feeling something, happy, sad, angry, frustrated. If you get them feeling something, you could persuade them to do something. That's why I only watch documentaries. I don't even have cable in my apartment here. And I'm always the guy at the end of the documentary who's joining the movement, right? I'm going to Uganda to save the gorillas because that documentary created frustration or anger in me. So that's why I think video is taking off so much, because video is a medium in which we can use all 3 pillars and we can get the other party feeling something. We can storytell to get the other party feeling something. So when it comes to persuasion, so to answer your question, we've got to understand that we need to, yes, be credible. We need to prove the things that we're saying. And we also got to get the other party feeling something. And to circle back just for a second, back to AI. And AI is also telling us that top sales performers, when they're on a typical sales call, they're speaking only 43% of the time, and they're listening 57% of the time. So they have a talk-listen ratio of 43 to 57. Bottom salespeople, poor sales performers, are speaking upwards of 75% of the time on a typical phone call. And the AI is also telling us that if you can get the other party blabbing their mouth, basically talking for more than 4 minutes at a time on that typical call. So if you can just get them talking for more than 4 minutes, your chances of closing that sale drastically increase. Why is that? AI doesn't tell us the why. It just tells us this is the data. This is the evidence that all these conversations are telling us. And I think that has to do with pathos. People are not heard in today's society. So if you can actually just shut your mouth and listen to what the other party is saying, you might learn a few things. And the other party is also feeling heard, and they're feeling connected to you. And so back to aligning sales and marketing, it's pretty simple stuff. It's human dynamics. We need to be able to listen. We need to be able to understand, know when to shut up, and get the other party feeling like they're being heard. Sales and marketing is like any transaction. So I say in negotiation, there's always a buyer and seller. There's always going to be, if you're my wife, Jeff, you're not my wife, but if you're my, and I'm trying to convince you to go visit my family in Tampa for the holidays, right? That's a negotiation. You want to go to the Bahamas. I want you to come to Tampa to visit my family. So I need to sell you on my point of view, and you need to be able to buy that. And you're selling me on the Bahamas, and I need to be able to buy that. So in every negotiation, there's a seller and buyer relationship. And if you're trying to sell your position, your point of view, you need to be strategic about it. So marketing needs to be able to sell their point of view to sales, and sales need to buy it, and sales need to be able to sell their point of view to marketing, and marketing needs to buy it. And in order to have a successful buyer and seller relationship, you need to kind of use age-old negotiation and communication strategies and tactics because they work. And that takes kind of rolling up your sleeves, getting parties face-to-face, getting parties together, keeping email and electronic communication out of it, and kind of rolling up your sleeves and doing the work to understand each party. I wish I could be more specific, but I'd like to be able to be more specific with an example. But here's an example. I wrote about this in a recent blog. So if you can get, so one of the first things I ask a buyer when I'm dealing with a buyer, when I'm trying to get a buyer to buy something from me, I ask them, who in your organization is making your life more difficult, right? Who are my roadblocks? And if you can understand the organizational landscape and understand who are the ones, because that buyer might want to say yes to me. They might agree with me, but they have to say no to me because someone is saying no to them. So if the buyer and I can work together to understand who the no's are, and I can learn what I need to do to turn those no's into yeses, where it becomes like a collaborative effort where and me are working together to turn that no into a yes, then I'm going to have a lot easier time kind of selling my solution or my product. So the same holds true in sales and marketing. If salespeople can understand the organizational landscape of the marketing department and understand who the key players are in marketing, and understand what their values are and get clarity around their direction, that would go a long way into helping that relationship become more aligned. I feel like I'm just blabbing away here. Jeff, please save me. I'll talk.
No. I wanted to step out of the way because you were sharing a lot of good stuff, and I didn't want to interrupt the flow.
Okay.
But what I wanted to, the last part that you mentioned, I really like, because I have said and have heard from other folks as well, is that we have to remind marketing in particular, they have to sell what they're doing to sales. Mm-hmm. And to take that one step further, it's leadership's responsibility to be able to demonstrate to the other department the value that their people are bringing. So marketing needs to show their value to sales, and sales needs to show their value to marketing so that they appreciate each other and have incentive to work together.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. And also, so understand those values, but also, a great exercise to do is kind of have like a pitch session where you take someone from sales, you take someone from marketing, and you have sales sell their value proposition. So what sales brings to their organization to that marketing person, and that marketing person then sells their value proposition, what marketing brings to their organization to the salesperson. So you have this exercise of sales and buying and marketing kind of selling their value propositions to each other. And it makes for a great exercise, and it also makes for kind of like an eye-opening experience, because you'll be able to learn things from both sides in that situation.
I think a lot of people if they did this exercise, would be surprised what they can learn from their colleagues and really understand how, on both sides of the fence, if you work with people more strategically, they can make your life a lot easier and your work more effective and efficient. So yeah. I agree with you. So in the little time that we have left, I do definitely want to get a little bit tactical for folks that are listening. If I am a VP of sales or CMO, how do I, from a persuasion standpoint, go to my CEO with a compelling argument to dedicate resources to a initiative like this? Walk us through, what does that look like from a persuasion framework?
Okay, so a VP of sales and marketing or marketing or both need to go to their
and they're on the same page. They agree that we need to be aligned, so they're on the same page. We're just going to the CEO or the other folks in the C-suite to kind of pitch this. So give them some tips on what do they need to set up to be successful in that interaction.
Well, I guess I guess what we find ourselves in there would be it's a sales process, right? It's a sales process, and I think what you need to do, and this is kind of cliche, but this is what's coming to my mind right now. You need to kind of make get the CEO feeling like it is their idea. So it's not about going into that meeting with that CEO trying to persuade the CEO, trying to convince the CEO by talking. I think you want to go in there more as a student, and you want to go in there trying to gather information. So go in with a bunch of questions. Who, what, where, when, why, and how questions, and keep those questions kind of focused around organizational goals, organizational challenges, what's going right, what's going wrong, and go in asking those questions and let that CEO talk. Let them talk and just let them talk. I'm going by AI tells us that in any sales situation, the magic number is 11 to 14 questions. So this is, let's say, a 45-minute to 1 hour phone call, 11 to 14 questions. Anything less than 11 questions, your chances of closing that sale, getting what you want, drastically decrease. Anything more than 14, drastically decrease. So 11 to 14 questions, who, what, where, when, why, how questions around business issues. Let the other party talk, let that CEO talk. And then you need to choose 3 or 4. And again, I keep on going back to AI because it's giving us so much amazing data. Right now, it's not some old dude from the 1920s who's saying, hey, you got to win friends and influence people. Now it's machine learning telling us this is what's actually happening. So pick 3 or 4 challenges, problems that CEO brings up that have to do with, what's the proper word? Misalignment? Misalignment?
Yeah. Misalignment.
3 or 4 problem areas that have to do with misalignment of sales and marketing, and sales and marketing VPs be the solution to those problems. And of course, whatever you say is the solution, back up those things with some sort of evidence, things to kind of back up your case. I don't know what that would be, but I guess just have a plan. So these are the solutions, and this is how we plan to execute these solutions. So it's almost kind of like you're taking that CEO. It's not complaining, because CEOs here complaining all day long. They're taking care of people, problems, and challenges all day long. Let the CEO kind of vent, take that venting, extract 3 or 4 problem areas out of what that CEO is saying, and then use those 3 or 4 problems and say, hey, we can be a solution to those problems by aligning sales and marketing And this is how we plan to do it. A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I love it.
Oh, good.
I love it. Let me tell you. So I want to wrap up our conversation to make sure we stay in time, but this was really, really, really good stuff. I love just kind of how you've laid out a lot of the AI learnings that like I had no idea about. And so I think I would implore people to learn more about this, because it seems from our interaction today, we're getting a lot of insights onto how we can do this stuff better. So thank you for making that a part of the conversation. And Tony, I appreciate everything you shared with us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate being here.
Thanks for listening to the episode. Don't forget to visit me at jeffdavis2.com and follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Davis2. Did today's conversation resonate with you? Then share with your colleagues to help the Alignment Podcast grow. Join us for the next episode, where we continue to talk about how to create togetherness.